Hey guys, in case you can't tell, I'm not there with you today, but I will go through the lesson with you. We are starting our last unit, Unit 14. It's going to take us through the rest of the year. And basically, we're going to start from after the war until the end of World War II here, okay, guys? Um, so, the goal of this unit is to analyze and evaluate the changes in Europe from 1919 to 1949. There's going to be a lot of stuff that goes on. Specifically, today we're going to be looking at the causes and impacts of the Great Depression. And you will have this formative to do where you answer these two sets of questions using this picture and from what we were going over today in the PowerPoint notes. If you want, I'm going to put up a copy of the notes on the actual Google Classroom assignment, but if you ever want to just go, you get them right here. Or if you want some additional information, you always read the textbook chapters here. They're always attached. So today, we'll go ahead and get started on the notes, okay? So everybody hopefully has heard of the Great Depression, and we're going to talk about it a little bit here and go over it. So first question on your notes is, why were things going well for America's economy after World War I? Okay, it was the boom time for the American economy. The pace was faster, the buildings were higher, the morals were looser, and the liquor was cheaper, according to F. Scott Fitzgerald. Okay, and we come out, in addition to Japan, in the best shape because the stock market is up, so everybody's making money in the stock market, and also we gave a lot of loans to Europe and during the war, and we're making money off those loans because they're having to repay us now, okay? So for number one, the stock market is up, and the second part is we gave out loans to many European countries to rebuild, so we're making a lot of money in that because you got to think we didn't fight the war in our home front like them, and we got in late, so it wasn't that big of strain on our economy and our nation, okay? Number two, how did technology contribute to the Great Depression? Well, you had advances in automobiles, and they're more affordable. They're showing up more now. People moved to suburbs, so there's also that, and more air travel, okay? So before, it was mostly you're going to do train or maybe car, if that. And we see that with Charles Lindbergh, flew from New York to Paris. Amelia Earhart, she solo flight across the Atlantic. Also, you had in 1920 the first commercial radio station in Pittsburgh. And what happened now is you have all these people who are able to, instead of be isolated, in this state or this country or this continent, everybody's becoming more interconnected now because you can communicate with each other with radio. You could travel farther with your car. You could travel with planes. So what happens is when there's an issue now, instead of just it being isolated, there's going to be a ripple effect, and it's not localized anymore. So that's the second part, okay? Is that if there's an issue, it causes a ripple effect, and it's not localized. So that's how you're going to see a worldwide depression instead of just maybe a depression for a country, okay? What were two major problems facing post-war Europe? Well, they're almost all of them were bankrupt because they had to pour everything they could into the war. Plus, they're spending a lot of that now on rebuilding, okay? A lot of these places went from monarchies to democracy, so you have these new democracies formed. And it wasn't exactly like ours where we just have two. You would have maybe 4, 5, 6, 7, who knows how many parties. And that's harder to do because it's hard enough with our two parties to get done, right? So they would have to team up with other parties to try to get enough of a majority. Well, it's hard to get anything done and be able to respond to any problems. And they had lack of strong leadership. This hasn't been a thing in their country. This is brand new. So it's something they're getting still used to. Okay. So again, number three, many countries were nearly bankrupt and had new democracies. Okay. And, they had, weak leaders and all that stuff going on. All right. What was the name of Germany's government after World War I? It is going to be the Weimar Republic. Okay. It was a very weak government and had many political parties, like we're talking about with the new democracies, and it was blamed many people blamed the Weimar Republic for losing World War One in the Treaty of Versailles because there was no, foreign soldiers on German land at all. They were still, in another country fighting. They never gave up any German land, and they surrendered. So many people had this feeling that like they got stabbed in the back. Like we weren't losing the war, we're sort of deadlocked in it, and you surrendered and sort of stabbed us in the back. And that's why we're going to talk about here shortly the problems we're having now and the humiliation of the Treaty of Versailles. So you see this as a cartoon, like stab in the back. You'll see that a lot, or people reference that a lot. Well, now we're talking about that right now. So hyperinflation is what happened to the money in post World War One Germany. So number 5, hyperinflation. And what hyperinflation is, the value of money went way down to where, as you can see here, this lady burning it was worth more value than actually spending it. Okay. So we have a few, people giving their, what they experienced. So this person said at 11 in the morning, a siren sounded. Everybody gathered in the factory yard where a 5-ton lorry, so truck, was drawn up, loaded with paper money. The chief cashier and his assistants climbed up on top. They read out names and just threw out bundles of notes. As soon as you caught one, you made a dash for the nearest shop and bought anything that was going. You often bought things that you did not need, but those things you could start to barter. You went around and exchanged a pair of shoes for a shirt, or a pair of socks for a sack of potatoes, some cutlery or crockery. For instance, for tea or coffee or butter. And this process was repeated until you eventually ended up with the thing that you actually wanted. So you had to go through and like, okay, we got this money, let's just get rid of it, get whatever we can, and then we actually start trading stuff that's worth value. So anything, shoes, socks, to get what you actually need. And this is another person. I vividly remember paydays at that time. I used to have to accompany the manager to the bank in an open 6-seater Benz, which was filled to the brim with bundles and bundles of millions and milliard mark notes. We then drove back through the narrow streets, quite unmolested. And when they got their wages, the workmen did not even bother to count the number of notes in each bundle. So that's how, like, okay, you gave me a big bundle of notes. If it was for today, like $1, if you gave me a big bundle of dollars, I'd be happy. Then they're like, hey, it's nothing. It's not really worth a single thing. And here's another one, which just shows you how crazy it could happen and how quickly. So one fine day, I dropped into the cafe to have a coffee. As I went in, I noticed the price was 5,000 marks, just what I had in my pocket. I sat down, read my paper, drank my coffee, and spent altogether about 1 hour in the cafe, and then asked for the bill. The waiter duly presented me with a bill for 8,000 marks. Why 8,000 marks? I asked. The mark had dropped in the meantime, I was told, so I gave the waiter all the money I had, and he was generous enough to leave it at that matter. So, like, in 1 hour, something went up $3,000 as a cup of coffee, which is a crazy amount of money. And here's a little funny story. 2 women were carrying a laundry basket filled to the brim with banknotes. Seeing a crowd standing around the shop window, they put down the basket for a moment to see if there was anything they could buy. When they returned around a few months later, they found the money there untouched, but the basket was gone. So the basket was worth more than a basket full of money, which is crazy to think of. And here we see, for example, one egg in 1913 before the war is 8 cents. In the summer of 1923 is 5,000, say dollars, it's marks. 5,000 marks, and then it's, what is that, 80 billion? Yeah, 80 billion. So the same thing with butter, 270 to 26,000. Is that 6 trillion? Yeah. Basically a kilogram of beef, 175 to 1,800, and you see it just keeps on crazy how much this stuff is costing people. Like, can you imagine buying a pair of shoes for $32 trillion? They were eventually admitted to the League of Nations and had to sign a treaty promising to never go to war with France again, which is a crazy thing you think you'd have to actually go through and do. We're going to talk about they have the Kellogg brand pack promise, okay? And we can look here, and basically what that was all these different countries, including Germany, Italy, Japan, uh, sign the treaty to not go to war anymore. Okay, we're going to stop the war. We just went through World War One; it was terrible. And you can see here, Japan didn't actually make it that long. They started, have make some more with China, and you can see here in this cartoon, like, hey, look, we've signed this thing, and he's still doing it. So you see, that wasn't really. It was a pie in the sky thought to be able to end war because it's going to continue to happen. Yeah, and I already said that. It's ironic that Germany, Italy, and Japan all signed because they're all going to be the ones to start World War II. All right, so now we're going to move on to number 7 here. What is October 29th, 1929 known as, and what happened? We're going to start here. So the world depended on the U.S. economy. So we're the strongest economy. Everybody's, depending on us to make sure their economy works. So the prices of food went way down, and banks were weakened from unpaid loans. Okay, so people had a lot of loans, but they didn't pay all of them back, which is fine. And then on October 29th, 1929, known as Black Tuesday, the stock market crashed. Okay, so number 7 is Black Tuesday, and the stock market crashed. And guys, if this is too fast, I'll put the slides up here so you can also follow along on there, okay? As you can see here, they're riding high, everything's going good, and it drops and it continues to drop, as you can see here, for about 3 years until it hits its lowest. So imagine the stock market just continually go down, 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 down. All right. What steps led to the Great Depression after October? Well, the stock market crash sped up the decline, okay? Banks had to close because people are coming to try to get whatever the money they can because they're losing money in the banks or the stock market, trying to get what the money they can. Everybody's pulled out money at the same time. The banks run out of money. And because of that, companies can't take out loans or do anything like they need to be able to pay workers, to get loans to get materials for jobs, whatever. So people are losing jobs. And then you have farmers and farms and homes are being lost left and right. And so by 1933, you had 25% of Americans were out of work. So 1 out of 4. So that's a crazy number to think of, that, 1 out of 4 people did not have a job. You can see here, basically saying it was a cartoon. All right. American bankers called in overseas loans. So that's going to spread worldwide now. High tariffs kept Europe from selling goods in America. World trade dropped and unemployment rose. So that's going to start spreading it, like I said, throughout the world. And instead of it just being isolated to America, it's going throughout the world now. There is not an unemployed man in the country that hasn't contributed to the wealth of every millionaire in America. The working classes didn't bring this on. It was the big boys. We've got more wheat, more food, more cotton, more money in the banks, more everything in the world than any other nation that ever lived ever had. Yet we are starving to death. We are the first nation in the history of the world to go to the poorhouse in an automobile. So you're sort of showing the ironic nature of what's going on. And you see here, this is what they're going to call a Hooverville. As you see, it's just houses thrown together because they lost their houses. So they're getting scraps or whatever wood they can and building a little shacks, basically, an abandoned property. And you see it just haphazardly put together. They're going to be called Hoovervilles after President Hoover, who was the president at the time. Eventually, we'll start seeing Britain elected a coalition government that brought slow recovery, and France tried several coalition governments but failed, but they kept democracy, though, throughout this part. Scandinavia, this is how these countries are responding to increased socialism but remained democratic. And in the United States, FDR began the New Deal in the U.S. and large government spending. So you'll see stuff like, Ottoman Park here was helped built with this money in the New Deal. Tons of these public works are being done. The dams like TVA dams down along Tennessee River. All this is spent by the government to increase jobs and be able to get people, money in people's pockets. Others countries, however, turn to dictators for leadership, okay? And we're going to cover that in the next unit. You see the other side of how people responded to this disaster that was going on worldwide, okay? So I hope that helped you. So you would get this done, okay? The notes. And then I'm going to have a video for you to watch. And then I want you to do your formative. And after that formative, I want you to go through and check Infinite Campus. Make sure you're not missing anything, any work, because on Wednesday is the last day you can put in any grades for your midterms. Especially if you're missing any tests from this 9 weeks, go ahead and get that done. If you're missing any tests at all year, get those turned in. If you have any, everything turned in, you have every test, you can go and do some practice for cert, because on Monday and Tuesday you have English and math, depending on what class you have that day. We want to make sure we hit your goal that you set so you gain your reward, okay? I'll see you on Thursday then, guys. If you have any questions, you guys just email me and I'll try to get back to you, okay? Have a good day, guys.